Hello. Thank you all for joining us. My name's Sam Barker. I'm one of the personal finance reporters on the Mirror, and I'm joined by Graham Hiscott, the head of business. And today we're going to be talking about the cost of living, which is unfortunately going to be going up this year. But fortunately, the good news is there's an awful lot you can do about it. So we're going to go through some of the main increases, ways to offset that, and we'll also be taking questions from the audience. So please do feel free to chip in if there's anything you particularly want to see answered, and we'll do our level best to answer it. So yeah, hello Graham, how are you?
Good morning, Sam. Yeah, good to speak to you. Hi.
Hello. Good stuff. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe if we kick off then with maybe some of the big issues that are going to be going up this year, the household costs. So, I mean, obviously the big one is energy. We've also sadly got increases in the cost of food, rail fares, fuel prices are still very high, car and motor insurance, national insurance. There's an awful lot on the list. I think really the big one for consumers is energy. So, Graham, can you talk us through a little bit of why are we seeing this big increase in energy costs, and what's the next step for this in April, please?
Yeah. Okay, Sam. Well, I guess there's the sort of the bit that people really don't know that much about, perhaps, but it impacts on what we all pay for energy is wholesale costs. So that's the bit where the supplier goes out there into the market, buys the gas and electricity that it then sells to us. That's called the wholesale costs, and that has gone through the roof in the last year. At one point, it was about 500% up year on year. So, what are the reasons? Well, there's lots of different reasons, aren't there, Sam? But I think so. In no particular order, you've got economies which are emerging from lockdown, particularly in the Far East and Asia. So, when those factories all start firing up again, they want to buy a lot more energy, a lot more electricity, a lot more gas. There's a finite supply, so constrained supply. So that pushes up the wholesale price. There are things like the oil price, which does have an impact on gas prices. So that has a sort of sideways effect and pushes up those prices as well. Then in the UK, for instance, we've got things like we haven't got enough storage. Some people say so. There's again that limits the amount of gas that we can just use. We can rely on ourselves. So we have to buy in a lot more from abroad. But yeah, there's a lot of different moving parts there. But the impact it's having is been huge, isn't there? I mean, should we talk about the price cap? This thing, which
I think it's probably a good time to get into the price cap, because obviously there's so much discussion around this and what it's likely to do in April. So I mean, yeah, it's one of these things where it's quite a complicated thing to explain, isn't it? But the upshot is it acts as a suppressor. It's a cap on the amount that the average household can be charged for sort of typical gas and energy usage. So in normal times, sort of before these gas prices started going up in late August last year, they really started soaring. The advice from people like me would be fix your energy bills. So the price cap applies to variable rate energy deals. We're in a bit of a topsy-turvy world at the moment, but in the normal world, we would say fix your energy deal. They're the cheapest energy deals on the market. They're not subject to the price cap, but that doesn't matter because the price cap is normally for people who complete their fixed term energy deal, fall off it onto a variable rate, which then goes up. But now, because energy suppliers can control the cost of the fixed rate cap, but they can't control the variable, the fixed rates have just gone absolutely soaring, almost all, I think I'm right in saying all of them, hugely above the variable rate deal. So we've really turned everything on its head.
Absolutely.
And so that would be kind of my advice really for almost all households is, sadly there is a huge cost of living related to energy bills. They are going to go up, and it seems that they're going to keep going up in April. Do we have any sort of idea how much they might go up?
We do, and so this cap it's worth just going back on the fact that the cap affects 15 million households, and that's out of about 28 million households in the country. So almost we're on about half. Let's say 11 million of those are those that are on what they call, they're not great names, but they're called standard tariffs or default tariffs. But as you said, as you explained, it's what you're on if you're basically not on a fixed tariff, not a fixed deal. And another 4 million are those that are on prepayment meters. So those that where you normally have to go in and sort of top up your meter as and when you need to. Well, I mean, we've already in October that price cap went up, and this is an average, went up by £139 to £1,277 a year. The average is slightly, well, averages are what they are. So you'll find people that will be paying a lot more than that, and people are paying a lot less than that. But yes, we do have a very good idea about what prices are going to be from April 1st, because Ofgem, who are the industry regulator who police this and set it, have already indicated to us that that prices could go up by, that price cap could go up by another 50%, 50, not 1550. And actually, we'll know sooner than April. It's a date for the diary. It's not going to be a day of celebration, but February 7th is when Ofgem will announce how much that price cap will rise by from April the 1st. Now, so 50%. Now that would take the average standard variable tariff, standard variable rate bill to £2,000 a year, there or thereabouts. I mean, these are phenomenal increase, 50%. And the other, just to pile on the bad news, I'm afraid they review this twice a year. And the next time they'll change the prices is in October this year, just as they were changing in October last year. And there are experts who are saying that it could rise to £2,200, £2,300 a year, so about another £1,000 on what people are paying at the moment. There's actually, what will happen is an issue which is being discussed at the very highest level. So you've got ministers, business secretary meeting with energy bosses, and the big debate is, well, okay, the warning is that they could hit £2,000 a year in April. What can be done? What can be done to make sure it doesn't hit that level? What can be done? And that's the big issue that's being debated at the very highest level now.
I mean, it's certainly a sort of an interesting question, isn't it? And I guess we're all hoping now that there is some sort of government action, industry action. But of course, a lot of these energy companies they were the big six energy companies. Some of them were pressing the government to get rid of the price cap entirely.
Yeah.
So but I suppose we can only hope that the government does step in and the industry steps in to help. I think it's probably worth planning for the worst, if you see what I mean. So, if we were to give some advice to households, what can you do to limit the price of energy? And we'll get into the other prices as well, because obviously this isn't just energy, but energy is the big one. What can you do to limit the price of energy? And I think certainly from my end, I would say if your cheaper fixed rate energy deal is coming up for renewal, the first thing to do is to kind of shop around. It's very, very unlikely that you will find a cheaper fixed rate deal unless your energy provider, current one, offers you a deal which isn't on the market. Almost all customers. I think definitely the best thing to do, and people like Martin Lewis from Money Saving Expert will say the same thing. The best thing to do is to fall onto that variable rate deal. Unfortunately, it probably means that you will be paying more than your current fixed rate deal. There's only so much we can do to offset that, but it does mean that you won't be paying more than a certain amount, normally £1,277 a year. That is an awful lot to swallow. So the other thing to do is to kind of look at the other end of that seesaw, I suppose, which is how can you reduce your household energy bills? And we haven't, I could rattle on all day about this, but I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. I'll run through some of them, but the money pages of the Mirror, websites of the national press, we've got loads of guides on this, as does Money Saving Expert. So please do feel free to kind of Google it. But there are an awful lot of things that you can do. We all know about turning appliances off at the wall. A lot of people don't know about unplugging them, because a lot of devices, especially modern devices, draw power even if you turn them off at the wall. So you can bring your costs down, which is going to be particularly important if you are on a variable rate deal, because obviously the cost of that varies. So switching devices off, turning the thermostat down. I know it's quite chilly at the moment, but bringing the thermostat down as low as you can bear. all of these things are very, very small, but they do add up. So that would be my advice.
And sorry, Sam, some of them do involve a little bit of outlay. So you might have to, if you go to DIY shop, get some draft proofing for around the door, around the windows. Sort of fairly minimal increase outlay, but it does, again, as you're right, that's really one of the things you can do. Oh, on the fixed rate, I would say that I was having a look at this, and in fact, we've got a piece going in, doing either online or in paper soon, about the fact that there are fixed price deals which are astronomical. Don't touch them with a barge pole, but there are others that, when you look beyond April's increase, could actually protect you for particularly 1 or 2 years. So they might be worth sort of budgeting for what the standard variable rate might be further out. So it's worth, as you say, looking at how many pages in on because there's lots of good advice.
I suppose that's a sneak preview. Firstly, by the way, all readers, you're getting a sneak preview of the next print issue there. But yes. I suppose partly what we're talking about is we don't know really when this is likely to end, and so it's hard to really give solid, concrete advice. The only thing you can do, I think, when you're coming to the end of your fixed rate deal, is to shop around, compare the market, really sum up all of your options, and then make the decision that's right for you. But I wish we could say that there was a silver bullet, but sadly there isn't.
No, indeed. And a lot of people are coming off these fixed rate deals as we speak. Actually, they're sort of the forgotten victims. Actually, at the moment, there are a lot of people who might be, some people might be watching this and listening to this who are going, well, hang on, my direct debits have just gone up, more than 50%. It's very possible.
Indeed. Well, I tell you what. So, I mean, how would you feel? Perhaps we can. Energy is big. We're going to come back to energy as well a little bit later. Hopefully, compare the cost of energy to other countries and get into that if we've got time. Perhaps should we talk a little bit about some of the other household costs which are likely to go up this year?
Yeah.
I mean, energy is the big one, but obviously, as any driver will know, the cost of fuel is very, very high. It is very slowly. I mean, in November and December last year, we were seeing a series of all-time highs. Certainly 10-year highs in the cost of fuel. For many people, this is an absolute necessity. They need their cars. There's only so much they can do to really bring that down. But whilst that is ever so slightly starting to come down, it still remains hugely high. I mean, certainly this morning, the RAC said average price of petrol is 145p a litre. Diesel, it's 148p. I mean, these are just, eye-wateringly high fuel prices. I think there's an awful lot of things, a bit like energy, there's an awful lot of stuff that feeds into why these prices are so high. I mean, what are some of the big ones for you before we get into
I mean, I suppose some of the, I mean, another food, groceries. Generally, there's such competition between the supermarkets that, on the whole, they've really absorbed and soaked up a lot of the increases in. And this is again all this stuff that's happening behind the scenes. Always they think about it. So it's everything from the cost of shipping stuff from the Far East or labour costs, etc. But anyway, on the whole, the price of groceries has been generally fairly low. Grocery price inflation has been fairly low, but not anymore. I mean, in December, I think it was the grocery price inflation was, depending on whose numbers you look at, it's sort of 2-3%. Doesn't sound a lot, but then you apply that to the average weekly shop, and and then individually, and sometimes depending on what you buy, some of those, the cost of some things are going up by a lot more. Fresh meat, for instance, going up a hell of a lot. So looking ahead, that's going to be another area that people are going to see their prices go up quite a lot. The cost of the weekly shop at the supermarket is going to go up. Next, for instance, was talking about yesterday about how it was going to put up prices by about sort of 3% in the first half of the year to maybe sort of 6% in the second half of the year. That's not necessarily clothes that are going to go up by that much. It's more likely to be things like furniture, so non-essentials, if you like. But these are still sort of things that are going to go up.
This is true. Actually, I've just noticed as we were talking about heating there, someone's commented, Peter Hall, he says you also end up with people wearing jumpers and coats in their own homes to save them putting on the heating. I think people might just avoid food, he says, and just eating food that doesn't need energy to cook. Well, firstly, Peter, I was brought up in the countryside, and I have a sneaky feeling you might have done too, because wearing coats indoors in the cold winters that we used to get was not abnormal, but I wouldn't recommend it. But you know, sadly, I think I agree with you, and we've actually had mirror readers email us in saying the same thing. You know, I'm reducing the amount of cooked meals I have for my house. And these tend to be older people. Because the energy bills are just so high, we have to choose. And we hear this phrase increasingly. I have to choose between eating and heating. So very sadly, I think in the worst cases, you are probably right. People are going to have to almost start rationing energy. So we can, just to sort of talk through sort of a couple of bits that we sort of maybe need to dive into. Fuel. So obviously fuel costs are very, very high. Now, fortunately, there are some things which you can do to bring that cost down. Unfortunately, a little bit like energy, there is no silver bullet, but there are some things which you can do to lower the cost. And the main one really is just to shop around. I think as a country, we're not really that used to shopping around for petrol and diesel. Most people do it by convenience. It's worth bearing in mind that petrol stations vary in price. So obviously we all know if you're driving on the motorway, you're really going to pay top whack for fuel that you buy at service stations or any petrol station that's near a motorway. The best thing to do is to find the cheapest one near you and fill up there, because that's the only real way that you're going to see a big decrease. There are lots of websites which will show you, if you punch in your postcode, cheapest place near you. For example, petrolprices.co.uk. They're very, very good tools. They're very, very accurate. They're updated all the time. So my advice to people when it comes to fuel is definitely to shop around. And maybe it's worth sort of discussing a few other things which are going up. And sadly, this is, as we sort of touched on earlier, this is a long list. But for a lot of people, unavoidable costs are insurance, car insurance, home insurance. And normally, again, people like myself, advice would be to consumers, shop around, because insurers will charge new customers artificially low prices so that they can charge renewing customers artificially high ones. So that benefits you if you shop around, because you're always getting a cheaper deal. And the problem is that from the 1st of January this year, for car and home insurance, they've been unable to do this. And this is because the regulator, the FCA, has said, look, this is unfair to people who complete their year-long insurance deal, and now you're charging them top whack. A lot of people just pay it. It's almost a tax on that kind of behaviour. People assume that that's a fair price, and it's not. But what that does mean is that from the 1st of January this year, insurance prices have risen. So we had a look at this on the 31st of December. We were running some quotes for a sort of tip driver, and then same thing again 24 hours later. All the details were the same. The cheapest car insurance policy had risen from about £628 a year by £100 overnight. Same car, same risk, same everything. It's gone up. So sadly, and the same is true of home insurance. So we're all going to have to stomach these costs, because obviously if you have a car, you need to insure it. If you've got a house, if you've got a mortgage, you have to insure it, and it's a very good idea to insure it anyway, even if you're a renter, to get contents insurance. The cost of all of this is going to go up. So the best thing to do for insurance is to shop around, because obviously insurers will still be competitive. They do still want your business, and they know the only way to do that is to be competitive on price. So my advice would be to encourage customers to kind of
you're right. We should shop around. I mean, certainly, going back to groceries. I mean, there's big savings to be made. If there are websites where you can get alerts. So if there's things that you buy on a regular basis, you'll get alerts about when the retailer has reduced the price of that. Clearly, there are some supermarkets which are more expensive than others, looking out for promotion. One thing, Sam, I thought might be worth mentioning as well is that you could, I mean, if you're using credit cards, you could be shelling out on interest, and with the Bank of England putting up its base rate, and those borrowing costs could be going up. But there are probably options out there, aren't there, in terms of maybe you've got to be careful about taking on credit. But are there credit cards where you can get interest-free periods for long periods of time, so you could potentially bring down your borrowing costs to reduce your outgoings?
There are. I mean, it's worth being quite cautious if you do this. You've really got to do your homework, because
Yeah,
the issue with 0% credit cards is that they're only 0% for a certain period of time, and then you're going to be paying interest rates of, you know, 20, 40% on what
yeah,
you've borrowed. But yes, it
yeah,
is possible to do that, and certainly for big purchases, it can make an awful lot of sense, because you know you're buying something up front, and you're not paying interest on that. So for a great many people, 0% credit cards do make an awful lot of sense. And actually, before I forget, yeah, we were just talking about groceries there. Um, Again, you know, it's worth, if you can, shopping around for your food, for your groceries, because we're seeing huge increases of, you know, maybe 10% on an awful lot of food. And basically, yeah, the cost of almost all food, we can get into this later, because quite funnily, there's some food which is going down in price, not up.
mm,
This supermarket at the moment, this is according to which the consumer champions. The cheapest supermarket is Lidl. Obviously, you probably expect to see their name up there. Lidl is extremely cheap. Obviously, Aldi, and normally those two supermarkets alternate every month
mm,
for being the cheapest. Now, the only thing I would say about Lidl and Aldi is that they're quite hard sometimes to do your kind of, you know, big shop in them, because they don't have everything. But it does make an awful lot of sense, if you can, to shop at the cheapest supermarket near you. You know, we have mirror readers giving a kind of advice on this, because we write about this quite frequently. Batch cooking works an
yeah,
awful lot. Some mirror readers go the whole hog. They're going to the supermarkets looking for the yellow sticker deals. They know exactly when they're going to put them out.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
this is around your lifestyle, but there's an awful lot that you can do to, you know, bring the cost of grocery shopping down. And my
yeah.
advice would be, read the, you know, go on the websites of people like the Mirror, Money Saving Expert. You know, you'll find these guides, and they really are invaluable.
Yeah, mirror readers, you know, are brilliant at you know, they're already there with us in terms of knowing that, as you said, with different options in terms of keeping their outgoings to a minimum. You know, they've got fantastic ideas already. But I was thinking, I mean, like you mentioned, supermarket. Tesco's got its club card scheme,
Yep.
which can again offer discounts for those, you know, if you're looking at in that particular, you want to go to a particular supermarket. Cashback, again, maybe you want to mention about cashback cards and deals that you can, you know, when you get your spending. I've taken out a card where I get money back for going to a particular retailer, particular supermarket. It's not big, you know, it's not big rewards, but it's you know, money coming back to me rather than going to them, as it were, in interest. So there are little things that can be done.
Definitely, and I think what we're talking about here, you know, the big picture, like, is very, very clear. Sadly, we're all going to be paying more for the cost of living this year. What we can do is chip away at that, and
Yeah,
those kind of cards, those kinds of deals are an invaluable way of doing it. It might look like not a lot, but I think if you start doing a lot of things, it
yeah,
will pay dividends. By the end of the year, that all adds up to cash in all of our wallets.
yeah,
So I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great thing to do. I mean, in terms of, you know, some of the other costs which are going up, and
yeah.
do about it. Obviously, we've got rail fares.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, I mean, you know, this was, you know, during the pandemic,
Mm,
this sort of
mm,
died down for a lot of people, because
yeah,
commuting for a lot of us was not as necessary as it was.
mm,
Obviously, the trajectory now seems to be that this will be coming back and back and back, a little bit more home working than
mm.
before, but there'll be an awful lot of commuting. And obviously, rail fares are going to be going up by 3.8%
Yeah.
in, I believe I'm right in saying,
March. Yeah, yeah,
correct, yeah, that's right. So unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do, but the only kind of silver lining to this is that they would have been an awful lot higher if the normal rules had applied. Because normally in January, train companies are allowed to raise the price of their season tickets by retail price inflation plus 1%.
mm,
But this year, if they had done that, that would have meant prices going up by about 8%.
mm, yeah,
So the government has actually stepped in, firstly to say, guys, you cannot charge people an 8% increase on their season tickets.
mm,
In my opinion, they're astronomically expensive anyway, but that's a separate
mm,
conversation. But so not only have they kept the cap on the price of these things, but they've also increased the period that you can buy them. So by obviously from January until March. So the only advice that we can really give is, if you need to get a season ticket for work. The only thing that you can do is get one before March, because when that happens, these things are going up, and there's not an awful lot we can do about it. So yeah, that's.
Are there flexible fares? Are there things that you can do in terms of, have they introduced, for those people that maybe are lucky enough to, or want to work from home, maybe rather than the 5-day a week? Is there?
So there are. You can get a. I can't quite remember the name of it now, but you can kind of get a season ticket that's almost like a coupon style thing.
Yeah.
So you buy it if you're kind of doing a mixture of working from home and the office, whereas you used to go into the office 5 days a week. There are options where you buy kind of like a season ticket with a certain number of uses, and you have to use it within, I think it's about a month, which is the kind of the downside. So you need a bit of certainty from your employer about when it is you're actually going to be going in. But it works out in terms of price. The takeaway from this is it's an awful lot cheaper than buying singles in and out of commuting at peak time. And of course, it's an awful lot cheaper than buying a season ticket. So there is a kind of halfway house for people that are sort of not commuting in every single day.
Yeah, it does sound like, but beyond all this, I think we're all going to emerge from this perhaps savvier and more in tune with looking for those ways to make savings here and there, isn't it? Perhaps that's where maybe there is a slight silver lining.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's it would definitely pay dividends, I think. But obviously, people have got the other kind of big cost in our lives is time, and a lot of this stuff is it's great, and it's all very well me kind of giving this kind of advice. But people have got to weigh it up in their own lives. It's not worth, obviously, for fuel, for example, it's not worth driving, for an hour to go and get cheap fuel. You've got to kind of put the common sense filter on all this stuff. All that we can do is kind of let you know what's coming down the pipeline, and some of the things which is possible to do about it. So yeah.
Before we and obviously worth mentioning other things like obviously income tax, national insurance is going up in April. You've got the national income tax thresholds as well. So how much do you think that people are going to notice? How significant is April? Would you think, in terms of when people will really notice these increases? And when do you think a lot of them will bite?
I think you're right. I think April is the biting point for an awful lot of this stuff. And what we're talking about is, if you look at it as a seesaw, we're talking about the cost of living. On the other end of that seesaw, you've got your income, and when that starts to tilt, obviously it's going to make these other things seem much more painful. In the background, obviously, the big elephant in the room here is that we've had stagnating wages for an awful lot of time. I'm not talking about the mirror, by the way, in case my boss is watching this. As a country, we've had that. But from April, really, as you say, we've got these got increases coming in on national insurance, for example. If you are a member of staff, the amount that you pay is going to go up this year by 1.25 percentage points. That is all for a very good cause. It's going to pay for social care later down the line, but it is going to affect your take-home pay this year. And the government are pretty, absolutely nailed on. It is happening. So that's certainly one cost which we're going to see. And 1.25, it doesn't sound like a lot, but we're talking about the cost of everything going up. So that decrease in the income, things are going to seem much more painful kind of on the other end. So I've just seen this comment, and I've absolutely got to read this out. So this is, we were talking about, very, very thrifty, these kind of miracle mirror readers who come up with it. So Anne Lockie, she says, I use my washing machine and dryer when I have to in the evening. The tariff is less. This is an excellent point. I boil cooking evenings for the week. I use a thermal after I've boiled a full kettle to save reboiling for a while. Heating set to 18 degrees if I'm cold. I wear a house coat. Again, Anne, I can tell you were brought up in the countryside. I wear a house coat and jumper, or I use a blanket. I unplug everything that doesn't need to be plugged in. That is fantastic advice.
Fantastic advice,
yeah. I would fully recommend it. So yeah, Anne, I really do take my hat off to you. We should offer you a job.
Actually, I should say, also, if you look on the Energy Saving Trust website, they have lots of really good advice, and I think actually they totted up. They I think it was the average household to save about £240 think just a little bit less by 12 things that you could do. Now, some of them do involve some outlay, like draft proofing, and some of them actually, involve a bit more expense than that upfront. But there are lots of things, and usually say turning down the thermostat by 1 degree saves. I can't remember the figure, but it makes a significant saving. But yeah, putting on an extra layer if you can. A lot of people will be already have that extra layer on and saying, I'm already cold. So, but there, as you say, thrifty. There are things that you can do which people probably actually have done for a long time, and as you say, perhaps even growing up doing it, in terms of maybe having an extra layer, or maybe only heating the homes and heating the rooms in the house that you use rather than that spare room that people don't go into that often. There are those little things that we have to think about, maybe more so now than we did in more recently.
I think so, and I'm sort of very conscious of time as well. So maybe it's a good idea to kind of sum up some of the big things that we've spoken about. So we're going to sum up big costs in the cost of living, big rises in the cost of living this year, and just a few kind of pointers on what you can do to bring your costs down. So if this is the bit where really this is the bit to listen to. So I mean, certainly from my end, Graham, I don't know how you think about this, but for me, the big rises really are energy, food. Well, a lot of kind of household goods, really, but food, rail fares, petrol, car insurance. Those are the big kind of 5 increases for me. Is there anything you can kind of tap onto that?
No, apart from those that we have no control over, which is the things like the taxation and which is coming down the line. But certainly things that you can do something about. Yep, I think that's spot on. I think energy is the one which is the real shocker. That's the one where you're. I think the food and grocery. I think that's a more subtle increase, because we buy, because we're out there, we're not buying food daily, weekly, whatever. Those are the things we don't necessarily notice it, but we spend so much on it. That a few percentages here have a big sort of impact on our monthly budgets. But no, you're absolutely right. Energy is the number one thing that's the number one thing that's coming down the road, which is going to hit us like a ton of bricks.
I think you're right. And so maybe if we just take a few seconds now, we're just going to go over again, just recap what you can do. This is your kind of takeaways if you're tuning in for how to bring these costs down. As Graham says, there's only so much we can do we can't avoid a lot of these increases. What we can do is chip away at them. So number one, energy. Be aware that your energy bill is very likely to go up for almost all people. The variable rate deals that are subject to the energy price cap are going to be the cheapest on the market. There are some exceptions, and as Graham says, if you were to take out a fixed rate deal, it may seem more expensive, but bear in mind you're insulating yourself, no pun intended, against future energy price rises as well. Car and motor insurance is going up, and sadly, again, there's almost nowhere to hide here. These are necessary costs, we've got to pay them. But shopping around, getting the best deal for you, absolutely crucial. All the big 4 price comparison websites let you do this, bearing in mind that there are some insurance companies like Direct Line, they're not on the aggregators, they are often the cheapest. It's worth giving them a call and just seeing what they can do for you. Groceries, food, things that you kind of need as a household. Again, it's being thrifty where you can, buying in bulk where you can, bulk cooking where you can, freezing it. These are all things which can be done to bring down the cost. I mean, what I would say is that there's so much we can say there. The best thing to do is to Google it, go online. People like the Mirror, other papers as well, we do write about this stuff. It's very, very good advice. I would sort of urge you to read it. So rail fares, again, the best thing to do, buy them. If you need a season ticket, get it before March, because that's when these are going up, 3.8% in value. If you're on a kind of sort of a split shift style system, then maybe you're not in the office every single day, but you still need to commute. Explore these kind of halfway house rail tickets that sort of let you, it's almost like ripping off ticket stubs and using them as and when you need them. You can save a serious amount of money. Fuel, petrol, diesel. The best thing to do, again, look for the cheapest petrol station near you, fill up there, and use your car as sparingly as you can. Obviously, for some people it's necessary, but it's worth bearing in mind most trips taken by car in this country are for less than 2 miles. If you have the mobility to walk, explore public transport. If you've got a bike in the shed, dust it off, now's the time. Yeah, so those would be my top tips for sort of how to keep a bit of a lid on this stuff and do what you can to get that money back in your wallet by the end of the year. You know, Graham, anything you'd add to that, do you think?
No, that's all great. I was just going to offer a glimmer of hope actually on energy. We've been so doom and gloom about it, and rightfully so. We talked earlier about the price cap and how it changes twice a year. Ofgem are currently looking at maybe changing that, so it changes more often than maybe 4 times a year. Now, why is that significant? Well, it could mean that but basically that what they do is they look at it and look at all the costs that suppliers have to incur, and then they adjust it as a result. Now, at the moment, wholesale costs are going up. They seemingly going only one way, but that will change. You know, the wholesale prices we saw over Christmas, New Year, they came down a bit. You won't notice it in April, but they came down a bit. But they will come down. That's the nature of these things. And by reviewing it more often than twice a year, potentially, as I say, 4 times a year, a bit further out, maybe. And no crystal ball here, so no idea what's quite going to happen. But it may be that those prices will begin to, you know, come down more. It could come down, and it could come down sooner than currently stands, which is twice a year where the prices are changed. So there's a glimmer of hope that, you know, that those prices will come down. No idea when. There's certainly no predictions that it's going to be this year. It could be into 2023. But as I say, these things could change quite rapidly. Nothing set in stone, and a lot could happen in terms of the government. We talked about the discussions that are taking place. There could be things that are happening in terms of, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, Sam, is the warm home discount, which is something that's a £140 payment that goes to vulnerable customers over the winter. There's talk about that being potentially the eligibility of that increasing. I think that's probably the most likely thing to happen at the moment, but nothing's set in stone, so that could potentially increase, or the eligibility could increase. Yeah, so there are sort of glimmers of hope there.
Absolutely, and I think it's a very good thing to end on a positive note. Obviously, we've had a lot of doom and gloom in this, but there are, as you know, the positive things here. There are things that you could do, and maybe the outlook isn't as bad as all that. So to say, you know, Graham, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this chat, and thank you as well to everybody that's been tuning in. I hope you think it's useful. Sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but thank you so much for kind of chipping in. We do read them all, we take them all on board. If there's anything you want to ask myself, you can email the Mirror Money team at mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. That's mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. We will do our level best to answer all those questions. But otherwise, I wanted to say, you know, yeah, thank you again, Graham. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Take care.